I wasn't rushing you. I was just
Yeah.
letting you know.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and call the January 6, 2025 City Council work session to order. And our City Manager, Miles Braswell, will go through the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. For consent, you have 13 items on consent, but I'm going to ask that we remove item B7 as we get to it. I'll explain it. The first item, B1, is the approval of the December 2nd, 2024 City Council meeting minutes. Item B2 is the 2024 Transportation Bond Referendum. It's a resolution certifying and declaring the results of the special bond referendum and the statement of the results. And you can see that this is recommended to complete the statutory process recommended by our bond counsel. You'll have a resolution certifying and declaring the results of the referendum, an abstract, which is it's an abstract of the votes, and then you have the general election results. Item B3 is surplus of issued equipment for the fire chief, given that he has announced his retirement effective February 1st, 2025. Item B4 is an economic development consultant selection. This was, if you recall from the retreat last year, staff was directed to proceed with a economic development consultant. We went through the RFP process and selected Retail Strategies to complete this service for us. And inside the council packet is the actual agreement and a memo from our Assistant City Manager and the agreement. And Mayor Pro Tem had made several suggested corrections to the agreement, and so we have made those and we have those in hand for execution later, if approved. Item B5 is the police department is requesting surplus of 2 firearms. Item B6 is the approval and declaration of surplus police vehicles, and these are listed in a memo. There are 5 vehicles that are listed there for surplus. Item B7 is approval of a declaration of surplus vehicles for water and sewer and streets and wastewater treatment plant vehicles. And you can see that it has a date on here of March the 4th, 2019. And this item does not apply. It's already been surplus, so we want to remove this at this time. Item B8 is the award for the lowest bid for the paving project. This is for the 2025 paving project. There are 3 bidders that are on the attached bid tabulation, and you can see that Draw Enterprise, Quinn Sales, and Blythe Brothers, all 3 bid. I do want to point out that there is a 15% contingency that's included inside of that total bid. And of course, contingency is not spent unless there's an approved change order through that. Item B9 is the RAISE grant funding. This is going back to the November 18th workshop where our planning department, Reagan Murphy, presented an update for our rail trail and the Abbey Creek Greenway, and staff, or council directed staff to proceed with the RAISE grant. We did some research since that time, and it looked like that we had a better chance to only include one project, the Abbey Creek Greenway, for the RAISE grant. and we thought we'd have a better shot at securing a possible grant if we had some consultant help. So we reached out to Kimley Horn, our transportation consultant, and they are going to provide assistance with the approval of a budget amendment in the amount of $46,300 for their work, and then we'll apply for this raised grant for the Abbey Creek Greenway. We also thought that for the rail trail that we'd had a better chance of securing a grant for another grant for the Safe Streets for All potential grant. And so we're pursuing that opportunity, and we'll bring that along to you all at a later date. So if you approve item B9, I do want to point out there is a budget amendment associated with that. Item B10 is the consideration and approval of an ordinance requiring the demolition of a residential structure located at 204 Hawley Avenue. And you can see that our code enforcement department has received 4 bids. And this demolition is due to a house that is in poor condition. It's had various calls for police and fire service, along with drug activity and various vagrants and squatters at the property. So we have gone through the process, and we're recommending demolition of 204 Hawley Avenue. Also recommending 202 Hawley Avenue. Both of them are owned by the same property owner, same situation, and that we're recommending demolition of that structure as well.
And just for those who are new, because I don't think we've done a demolition ordinance in a while, the cost of the demolition then is placed as a lien against the property, and so any proceeds from the sale of the property would go to reimburse that. So
Correct. B12 is the City Rec Large Reception Room fee waiver request. This is from the Lake Wiley Marine Commission Executive Director. Requested that we waive the fee. Typically, or in the past, they have used the room that we're sitting in today. A couple years ago, or about a year ago, we stopped renting this room, given that we constructed the city rec department and facility, and have various rooms for rental over there. Plus, it's easier for us to go through that process through Rec Desk. You can pay your fee online. The community room is not listed on our fee schedule for rental anymore. It's cumbersome for staff to coordinate outside usage of this room, and we don't allow outside participants to get on our network for any of the AV in this room. So we've transitioned this room for no renting, and then have transitioned all rentals to the City Rec Department. And to rent the City Rec, it's $80 per hour. So that's a fee waiver request for that. There's 4 meetings that the Lake Wiley Marine Commission would like to use that room: February 24th, May 19th, and August the 25th, and November the 24th. And the last item is the 2025-2026 fiscal year budget calendar. You can see that we're actually starting today with January the 6th as the budget kicks into the full gear up into adoption. So there's multiple dates listed on the calendar for approval. Mayor Pro Tem, I'll turn it over to you.
all right, thank you, Miles. Any questions about any of the items on the consent agenda?
I have one.
Yeah.
I haven't, I actually haven't seen a demo since I've been on council either. So I guess we reach out to the owner of the property, right? And let them know, like. how
Oh,
does the-
yeah, I mean, I think our code enforcement officer's here. If
I
she could
would-
probably
I would-
summarize
yeah, I'd
briefly.
be
I think that would be
Interested
helpful.
if we just got a summary on that, because I.
But
haven't
there's
been on
actually a
council.
hearing that takes place before,
There's all
The-
kind of due process
yes,
things.
yes.
Okay.
All built in, it's not.
But I
mean,
think
I'm
it
not
would.
against it, I'm just curious.
No, I think that's fine. I think it's good, since I didn't realize that even you hadn't been involved in one. But, so I think it would be good for just a quick primer so that we understand how these work.
Good evening, everybody. Generally, we try to avoid demolishing by working with the owner, but how the process works is a minimum housing process. We send letters of notice of violations, and then we'll inspect the property. And then after that, we'll make a decision of whether we need to move forward with the needing to, if they don't meet all of the requirements of our standards of Chapter 152. And then at that point, we will request a hearing. At the hearing, we'll kind of discuss with the owner the conditions of the house and what their plans are. And then from then, we send an order to repair or demolish. If the cost to repair exceeds 50% of what the home is worth, then it'll go into a demolish category. For these houses in particular, it's been ongoing since about 2017. It then caught fire, or the 204 caught fire in 2019, and numerous calls for service involving, there was an armed robbery, drug activity, overdoses, several overdoses. And they have had plenty of opportunity to fix the issue.
And so I believe it was tied up in probate, these two
It was.
properties, for a while.
It was, and the owner was, ownership was made in December of 2023, and we established a new minimum housing case because it had been put off for so long. And then they were issued an order to demolish in, what year was it? In February of 2024, with a deadline of May, and it's still standing, so.
And would the owner appeared at this hearing, or they were at least notified of the
Oh,
hearing?
yes, definitely, yeah.
Okay, because I know sometimes we have, if it's a property owner and we just have a mailing address for them,
Right.
sometimes we've had issues about whether they receive the letter or respond to it, but.
The very last hearing that we had, the owner's cousin was present, and we had the owner on the phone,
Okay,
speaking on speakerphone, so they were aware of what was
Mhm.
required.
okay. Very good. Any other questions about
No,
the
I'm good.
process?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I hope that was helpful. I would just, before we move on from the consent agenda, I do think we'll need to talk about this Safe Streets for All grant for the rail trail, because if you look in the materials, that one requires a 20% match, whereas the one we're applying for raise with the Abbey Creek does not require a match. And given how expensive that rail trail is going to be, I don't even know if 20% would be palatable. So we need to talk about that when it comes back. And then I did have some edits to the demolition ordinances that I hope were made assuming we approve them. Any other questions? All right, if there's nothing else, then I guess we will move into our regular meeting, and I will call the regular City Council meeting of January 6, 2025 to order, and we will begin with the invocation. Councilman Rumfeld will be giving the invocation, so everyone please rise.
Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together for this important meeting to conduct business on behalf of the city and our citizens. We ask for your guidance as we consider the matters before us tonight, and thank you for the staff and others who spent time preparing the presentations that we will hear. We also pray for your guidance and peace over our country in the coming days and weeks as we transition to another presidential administration, and we ask all of this in your heavenly name. Amen.
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 And Catherine Lewis will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will begin with a number of recognitions and acknowledgments. First up, we are going to swear in some new Belmont Police Department officers, specifically Justin Fortner, Bailey Krim, Matthew Queen, Autumn Adams, Rusty Stamey and Rebecca Smith. And I will turn it over to Chief Falls to handle the swearing in.
Good evening, council,
Good evening.
Mayor Pro Tem, Manager. It's an honor to stand before you tonight and swear in 5 new officers for the police department. There was supposed to be 6, but 1 couldn't attend. Rusty Stamey's not here. As you may know, recruitment and retention in law enforcement is becoming harder and harder, and since COVID, there's been a lot of things going on in law enforcement. It's harder and harder to find quality officers. But what I'll contend to tell you tonight is we have 5 before us. Finding more officers is becoming more difficult and very competitive across the nation, not just locally. But we're going to continue to hire the best officers that we seek out to locate. We hire like an all-star team is what I like to think of it. So I'd like to invite everyone up who we're going to swear in, as well as the person who's going to pin their badge. Just come on up and line up right over here. First, Justin Fortner, Bailey Krim, Matthew Queen, Autumn Adams, and Rebecca Smith. Just they'll line up, and then the parents or loved ones face them in front of them. We're gonna get these Bibles to them. You may have to share because we have 4. So I'd like to thank each one of the officers standing before you today and stepping up and accepting the challenge of becoming a police officer. I'd also like to thank the families for loaning us your police officer or loaning your loved one to us for a period of time. We will make sure that we protect them as much as they protect the citizens of Belmont as best we can. Because now you're part of the law enforcement family as well, every one of you, including your parents and loved ones. With that comes a lot of sacrifice that you'll understand a little bit more of. You've probably already made some. But I'd like to go ahead and start with the swearing-in ceremony. I'll turn it over to Cassidy.
You guys will place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. I, and state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and maintain the constitutional laws of the United States and the constitutional laws of North Carolina, not inconsistent therewith. That I will not be influenced in any matter on account of personal bias or prejudice, and that I will faithfully and impartially execute the duties of my office as a police officer for the city of Belmont according to the best of my skills, abilities, and judgment, so help me God.
If y'all will just line up in front of here, face back towards the crowd, and we'll get a picture.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got to pin the badges. Sorry about that. Good luck. You can stick them if you want. Well, I present you 5 new police officers for the city of Belmont. Would the council like to come around and get a picture?
All right, congratulations again to all our new police officers. Our next recognition is to recognize the Belmont Police Department for its CALIA reaccreditation, and to handle that are Chief Falls and Tyler Graham.
I'll turn the mic over to Tyler Graham, our accreditation manager.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. So we would like to have the actual award here tonight, but haven't made it yet. But it's coming. But we were there in November. But I'd like to take a moment and read this letter from our CALIA Regional Program Manager, Fran Moore. On behalf of the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies and the Commission Chair, Marlon Lynch, and the Executive Director, Craig Hartley, CALIA is honored to be recognizing Chief Falls in the Belmont Police Department. To provide a little background, CALIA was created in 1979 when the founding organizations, the International Associations of Chiefs of Police, the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Executives, the National Sheriff's Association, and the Police Executive Research Forum recognized the need within the law enforcement community during a period of time not unlike what we are experiencing in the nation over the last several years, to develop professional standards and to enhance the delivery of police services to citizens throughout the community they serve. Since its inception, CALIA has accredited agencies under standards developed by many of the best public safety practitioners and leaders of our time. The standards are reviewed continuously to ensure each is current and remains relevant. These standards cover a wide range of administrative, operational, and logistical issues and serve as a modern management model that provides the framework for recognizing professional excellence within public safety. In a time when public safety is being scrutinized, Belmont City leaders and citizens should take comfort in the fact that its police department has voluntarily committed to operating at a higher level under a set of rigorous law enforcement standards. The goals of CALIA are to strengthen crime prevention and control capabilities, formalize essential management procedures, establish fair and non-discriminatory personnel practices, improve service delivery, solidify interagency cooperation and coordination, and increase community and staff confidence in the agency. Based on the goals and mission statement of CALIA, it is important to recognize the awarded Advanced Accreditation Certificate to the agency at a public meeting where all can share and recognize in the hard work this agency has committed to remain accredited. The certificate itself is simply matted paper within a frame, but it has a much broader symbolic meaning. The certificate clearly represents the agency's effort to achieve accredited status, thereby demonstrating its willingness to change in order to effectively address contemporary public safety concerns. It represents a commitment to doing the right thing and doing it the right way. Lastly, it represents an ongoing dedication to ensuring the agency's resources that are appropriately developed, effectively deployed, and constantly managed, all in the name of safer communities for workers, visitors, and customers. In June of this year, CALIA assessors visited both virtually and on-site the Belmont Police Department and reviewed the agency's applicable files, activities, functional impacts, and management strategies. At the commission meeting held in Jacksonville, Florida this past November, CALIA commissioners reviewed the assessor's report, concurred with their findings, and unanimously voted to approve the Belmont Police Department for full CALIA Advanced reaccreditation. This is the first reaccreditation award since the department became CALIA accredited in fall of 2020. And just a little bit of facts on it. In North Carolina, there's only 36 other agencies that are CALIA Advanced accredited out of over 500 agencies. We're one of the 36. And also, within the United States, there's only 489 agencies that are advanced accredited. We're one of the 489 out of over 18,000 agencies.
Wow,
So,
that's amazing.
Great
Congratulations.
job.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Tyler, and I know it was a lot of work because I was involved in an interview, and I know Miles was as well, so there was a lot of preparation that went into the reaccreditation site visit. Recognition of the evening will be to our retiring fire chief, Chief Davis, Chief Todd Davis, and I will turn it over to Miles to introduce this recognition.
Yes, I'd like to call Fire Chief Todd Davis and Deputy Chief Alex Hardy to the podium, please. Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and members of the public, I appreciate the opportunity to stand before you to recognize the service of Fire Chief Davis. Chief Davis has announced his retirement effective February 1st, and he's pretty much committed his entire life to public service and has a distinguished career in public safety. And I'm just going to go through some of the highlights of Chief Davis's career. He's a lifelong resident of Gaston County. He was raised in Cramerton, and he graduated from South Point High School. His journey in public service began at an early age, where he volunteered with the Cramerton Fire Department during high school. After graduation, Chief Davis enlisted in the United States Navy, where he served as an operations specialist and petty officer 3rd class aboard USS Joseph Hughes, earning an honorable discharge after 3 years of service. Following his military career, Chief Davis pursued a path in law enforcement. He was a Cramerton Police Department officer from 1993 to 2000, and in 2000 he entered the North Carolina State Highway Patrol's Basic Patrol School, graduating with the 102nd Basic Patrol class. Chief Davis served as a master trooper in Gaston County until his retirement from the State Highway Patrol in October 2019. Chief Davis then joined the Belmont Police Department, climbing the ranks and becoming a captain in 2021. His extensive background in law enforcement and knowledge of the fire service, paired with his exceptional leadership skills, led to his appointment as interim chief in 2022. He was officially promoted to fire chief in October of 2022, where he has since led the Belmont Fire Department with distinction, overseeing multiple important initiatives and leading the department with honor. So Chief Davis, on behalf of the Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and our city staff, thank you for your leadership and your commitment to service. You will be missed, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak for a few moments. The entire fire department staff wants to formally recognize and express the utmost gratitude to Chief Todd Davis for his tenure and timely leadership. This is just a small token of appreciation on behalf of the city of Belmont and the fire department staff. Sir, just rest assured that we'll continue the mission of the fire department.
Wow, it's here.
You sure?
It's here.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am sure. When
Okay.
they swore in those new 5 officers right there, I did not want to start that over. There is no way. So yes, I felt really good after I heard it. However, first and foremost, I want to congratulate the Belmont Police Department on their recertification of accreditation. I spent a lot of time with that initial group to get that initial certification, and it's important. That standard is raised very high, and as Tyler said, there's only a minimum amount of police departments in this country that have that standard. That standard cannot change, period. You have to meet the standard. Trust me, those proofs get on your nerves, but it's just part of it. And that's the kind of service that's needed here in Belmont. So congratulations to the police department. This fire chief position was not in my career plans, as you can see from my resume, but I'll tell you, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it from the first day I walked in. It's like I was 18 years old again. And I'm very proud of the men and women you see standing behind me, because they took this challenge and they ran with it. And you can tell just by from what they have accomplished in a short amount of time. There is a lot of work to do, but they know there's a lot of work to do, and they're up for the task. These people are special. These people here are special. Those police officers back there, they're special people. There's a lot of sacrifices that's been made. You hear about it, but when you live that life, it's a big deal. But I want to thank you guys for the opportunity, and I want to thank these folks here for welcoming me into their house, because in the fire service, being welcomed into the house is the biggest challenge, and they did. It took a little time. There's troopers coming in here. Oh, what's going to happen? but they did. They accepted me, and it's deep in my heart. So thank each and every one of you. So, thanks. Good stuff.
All right, again, on behalf of the entire council, we thank Chief Davis for his many years of service to Belmont and in a variety of capacities, culminating in fire chief. All right, so that completes our recognitions and acknowledgments for the evening. I will entertain a motion to set the agenda.
Motion to set the agenda.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have set the agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of item B7.
Motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of item B7.
All right, motion made by Alex,
I'll second.
seconded by Catherine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is unanimously approved. That leads us to the regular agenda and item C1, public comment. We have one person signed up for public comment. The rules are set forth above. All speakers have 3 minutes in any topic. Please state your name and address. Be respectful of city council staff and the public. Typically, this is an opportunity to bring items to council's attention. We do not engage in discussion or debate. If warranted, we can direct staff or the manager to follow up with the speaker on his or her concern. Signed up for public comment tonight, we have Waleem Chaudhary. Yes, please come and come up to the podium, state your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes, and the green light indicates time has started, and then red means your time is up. So, thank you.
Respected council members, my name is Wasim Chaudhry. I'm here on behalf, my address is 101 Mayflower Court, Cramerton, North Carolina, 28032. I'm here on behalf of Chaudhry family. We had the legal dispute on this property started after my brother's death, like in 2017. And even though we wanted to do something about this property, but we couldn't do anything, there were like people living in that, tenants in his time, we could not remove them. So the case went through for a long time, I think until 2023. And till then, we couldn't do anything about the court order. Even they settled, I believe, in December 2023, we still had to pay some family members, like in a big amount. Till we settled that, we couldn't do anything. I had me and my nephew, we had a couple meetings with Lindsay, and we had like a few other properties that we worked on. On this property, we did clean it up from inside, outside, but where we made a mistake, it was like a little lack of communication with Lindsay. And right now we plan to do everything according to the city requirements, city demands. It was just like to be honest, lack of communication and lack of funds at the time. We couldn't like take over the project right away. But the only request I have, humble request, is right now, if I'm given like 30 days on the calendar, we will take care of this property according to the city standards, including demolition and all that. And I can present the pictures in progress, the contracts and everything to the city manager, Lindsay, willing to do anything, whatever it takes. But the only thing at this moment, I'm desperate like for a little time. I don't need more, just like on the calendar 30 days. That's only my humble request. I have a lot of papers, but I can't present them right now. It's just simply like, I'm willing and promising to take care of that in 30 days. That'll make the job easier on everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes general public comment for tonight's meeting. And we now move on to item C2, 2023-2024 audit presentation. And to do that, we have, is it Kelly Gooderham? Gooderham from Martin Starnes. So I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Kelly Gooderham. I'm the Senior Audit Manager for the city's audit, and we have prepared the following PowerPoint to present what we feel to be some of the more pertinent topics of the fiscal year 24 audit. We have issued a clean, unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion we can provide, and it just basically means we found no material misstatements that would otherwise be misleading to the reader of your financials. So first, we show a 2-year comparison of your general fund revenues and expenditures. We saw an overall increase in revenues of roughly $4.4 million, which was due to an increase in your ad valorem tax revenues. We also saw an increase in your expenditures of roughly $1.3 million, which was due to public safety as well as cultural and recreational expenditures. Here's a 3-year comparison of your general fund fund balance. Ending fund balance was $22.2 million, which was an overall increase of $4.2 million over the prior year, which was primarily just due to the overall increase in your revenues. So here is the calculation of your available fund balance. I did want to note that this is an internal available fund balance calculation. The LGC calculates it a little bit differently. They don't take things into account such as internal fund balance policies. We start with your total fund balance of $22.2 million, less your non-spendables of $29,000, less your stabilization by state statute of $1.6 million, less all other restricted fund balance, $1.3 million, and then that internal working capital fund balance policy of $5 million to arrive at total available fund balance of $14.1 million, which was an overall increase of $2.8 million over the prior year. So taking that that available fund balance, we turned it into a percentage of expenditures and transfers to other funds, which was an overall increase of roughly 9%. And I did want to mention, I took a look at the LGC's calculation of your available fund balance, and it's actually closer to roughly 97%. So now we'll go through your top 3 general fund revenues and expenditures. First, we start with your ad valorem tax revenues, which was an overall increase of $4.3 million or 39%. And this is obviously due to an increase in collections, but also the county had a revaluation for tax year. Then we have your unrestricted intergovernmental revenues, also increased around $296,000 or 5%, which was mainly due to an increase in your local option sales tax, which was seen pretty commonly across the state. Then we have your sales and services, also increased around $68,000 or 7%, which was due to an increase in your recreation department fees. Now for expenditures, we start with public safety, which increased around $827,000 or 10%, which was mostly due to salaries and benefits, but also an increase in your operating expenditures as well. Then we have transportation expenditures. increased 171,000 or 8%, which was due to an increase in your operating expenditures. And then we have your general government expenditures actually decreased, roughly 134,000 or 6%, which was due to a decrease in your admin and finance department expenditures. So now some details for your water sewer fund. Cash flow from operations ended at a positive 364,000. Your total net position ended at 55.8 million, including your unrestricted of 1.9 million. And then your change in net position ended at a positive 3.4 million. So the LGC requires certain information to be presented to each board at the commencement of each audit. This information comes from the LGC's data input sheet, which is prepared and sent with your audit report to the LGC. So first we have your quick ratio for your water sewer fund. The LGC considers anything less than 1, is normally concerned with anything less than 1, which basically means that the entity does not have enough cash on hand to pay current bills. So even though there was a slight decrease over the prior year, this is still a healthy ratio in the LGC's eyes.
What, just a quick question.
Yeah.
And I think I've asked this before. What's the average? I mean, is there like an average of what this ratio is across North Carolina?
I don't know if anybody collects that information, and I do not have that information.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if it would be, I don't think it would be comparable across
Right.
entities, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Some additional information that I have to communicate to the board is your performance indicators of concern. We did note 2 statutory violations disclosed in your footnotes, one of which resulted in a finding. Another one did not result in a finding. And then we noted 2 material weaknesses and 1 significant deficiency finding. And the city is required to submit responses to the statutory violations as well as the findings within 60 days of this audit presentation, and the majority of the board has to sign that response.
And what?
What are the
Yes.
violations?
I can tell you.
Yeah, those are not included.
The statutory violation that was disclosed in your footnotes but not result in a finding was due to a deficit fund balance in one of your projects, and that was just due to timing of grant revenue recognition. We can't recognize revenue unless it's received within 60 to 90 days after year end, so can't recognize it, therefore you guys spent more than what you received, but it will be rectified. It was a material dollar amount, but because of the nature of it, it did not result in a finding. The material weakness finding is due to material audit adjustments. There was another material weakness finding noted for over budget within the general fund, the water and sewer fund, and the recreation capital project. And then the significant deficiency was due to lack of proper bonding for the TDA, I believe. Yeah, it was the TDA. Because there was a statute change in effect as of this year, and there was just lack of communication, lack of, well, misunderstanding. But that has since been resolved.
And where is that? Where can you find that in the
Sure.
audit?
It is on page, it's in the very back. It is beginning on page 112.
Okay.
116 is the one she was just talking about.
Okay. Here we are.
116.
That's actually the corrective action plan received from the city. And I'm not sure how long you all have had your audit report, so if there's any questions that, arise from now and, until whenever, my contact information is here, but Jared also has it. So if you have any questions, I definitely encourage you to reach out to me.
Any questions for Kelly at this time? All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And thanks again to our finance director, Jared Piles, for getting everything ready so that the audit could be handled smoothly.
Well, just, can we just have Jared come up and maybe just talk
Yeah,
a little bit
that'd be
through
helpful.
Sure.
kind of these issues? I know we have issues that pop up every year, and I know that there's some that are just inherent for the city.
Nuance,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, but I just want to kind of understand, particularly the last one she was just talking about in regards to the TDA.
Yeah, so we were bonded for, so the statute changed on the minimum requirement for the bond for the finance officer of the TDA, which would be me. I misinterpreted that statute. It's supposed to be 10% of the budget or a minimum of 50,000, and I applied it at 10% of the budget. So just a misunderstanding on the statute.
Okay, gotcha.
So we were bonded for 25,000 instead of 50,000, something like that.
And then the other findings that she mentioned, would that be number 2 in our booklets here, the material weakness?
Over budget?
Yeah, so the over budget finding was I recognized revenue in the Recreation Center Project Fund for the Part F grant, and we did not receive that until October. And so I recorded that as revenue and a receivable at year end, and since it was not collected within 90 days of year end, that required a material AJE, and it caused us to go over budget in that fund. We've since received that funding. And so that's shored up, but it was just a technicality on the accounting of the revenue versus the receivable.
Gotcha.
I get that one, but what was the other one she mentioned? I thought at the tail end there that was more of a timing issue, the one you, I
Budget
recognize
Right.
that.
deficit?
But wasn't, yeah.
That was it. That's
Yeah.
the budget deficit. So because we couldn't recognize the revenue,
Okay.
we had more expenditures than
Okay.
than
So
we
they
had
were both
collected
related to
revenue
the
to
same
date.
nuance.
So it caused our fund balance
Mhm.
in that fund to go over budget, which is
I got you.
a finding, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Jared.
All right, so that brings us to item C3, Economic Development Project Jasmine, public hearing and resolution for a Level 3 incentive grant. I will entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
Motion to go into public hearing.
Second?
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Jason. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are now in public hearing.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor
Yes.
Pro Tem, as Donnie makes his way up. For council members, Mayor Pro Tem asked me to provide a little bit of background on the City of Belmont's incentive grant. So just to give you some background on it, that there was an incentive grant that was established by resolution in December 4th of 2006. And it's basically the same formulas that the county's incentive grant program has. They have 4 levels, and each level is associated with the dollar amount of the grant or the project itself. And so for our policy, it states that all net industrial development above 1 million would qualify, and it's the same schedule. It's like year 1. You get a grant equal to 90% of the tax due on the investment up to year 5. It goes 90, 80, 70, 60, 50%. So that's for 1 million. It's very similar to what the county has. They also have a level 2 grant, which is in line with the City of Belmont. It's at 15 million, and it's a 9-year grant. The county's is a 9-year grant. It starts at 90% and it works its way down to 10%. We have a level 3 industrial development grant, and the amount's 30 million, and it's a 10-year grant starting at 90%, going to 85, 80, 75, all the way down to 45%. And then very similar to the county's grant, we also have a 10-year, a level 4 grant that's also a 10-year scale, and it starts at 85% for 5 years, then it drops down to 70% for the next 5 years. One difference that our grant is different than the county's grant is our states that real property, machinery, and improvements, and the county states real property, new machinery, and equipment. One little nuance there. That's a difference from 2006 to now. And then in 2020, council directed staff to look at historic mill and adaptive reuse investment grants. And so in January 6th of 2020, there was a grant established by the city of Belmont, the same formula as I just recalled. And it is for the assistance of historic mills and redevelopment and adaptive reuse for a variety of reasons, such as residential, retail, and office uses. And so the mechanism, I guess, Jim was speaking towards, the mechanism for payment is that the incentive grant program kind of lists the payout procedure. And given that the county collects our tax, the company pays the taxes each year in full to the county. And based on which grant level you get, they reduce that amount and send back to the property owner. They use the tax office as well to determine the actual equipment that's associated with the grant based on that sliding scale. And then Donnie can apply any other information into the grant process that the county uses. So I'll turn it over to you, Donnie, this time.
Thank you, Miles. And I'll be glad to take feedback from Mayor Pro Tem about how much you want me to go into this. I can keep it fairly succinct. If you're mostly interested in the procedural parts of it, I can go over that. And I would also like to just give you kind of an idea how this all fits together, if that would be valuable to you.
I think so. It's been a while since we've done any incentive grants. I'm the only one that's had any experience with that, so
Okay.
I think it would be helpful to.
Okay. If there are any questions, please just stop me and ask, and I'll try to make this in a succinct, organized fashion so that,
Jim, this is what
We
you
can move
guys
to
did for US Cotton.
Yeah, we did it for US Cotton, right?
Well, we did, but that was before my time.
That was before your time.
Yeah. I think that one's actually about to expire if
just
it hasn't
tried.
already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay,
that's
sorry,
about
Donnie.
10.
that's fine. So I'll talk a little bit about this project and use that as an example of how this fits in. So when I come to you tonight, this is not a given that the company's going to locate. The project's of such a size that the state's offered their highest level incentive to the company. That's called a Job Development Investment Grant. It's called a JDIG. And that's where the company gets to retain a portion of the company's employees' state income tax return for a specified period of time. So the state generally has a motive to incentivize jobs because the people that work there pay income tax. Our motivation is to help build the property tax base because that's where we get most of our money. So we tend to have our incentives focused on property tax and real assets, and the state tends to focus on income and wages because that's how they get paid. So there's a nice split between the two, and they also fit together. When a company is offered a JDIG, it's approved by an investment committee at the state. It's a 5-person group that's appointed, 2 by the General Assembly and 3 by position. And they make a decision, they go into executive session, talk about it, and come out and they'll vote for it. And once they do that, that thing has an expiration date. It's not a hard date, but you don't ride that for 2 or 3 years. The state will come back to us at the county as the lead agency for business recruitment and say, well, what are you going to do? So we have to send them something back saying this is what we'll do because they want to know before they vote to give them a JDIG that we are in fact going to participate in some fashion. So obviously at the point that they offered that JDIG, we had not approved incentives at the county, which we now have, and that's what we're here for tonight. So we want to improve those incentives so that we can go back and follow up on the commitment we made to them. So I had to write them a letter saying that this in no way obligates the county commissioners or the Belmont City Council, but here's how we would incentivize a project like this, and here's what we would do. So in an effort to follow through on that, that's why we're here tonight, and then it gives a final piece of the package that the company would be looking for to make their location decision. And so we would have the JDIG plus incentives from the county and incentives from the city of Belmont, hopefully. So that gets all rolled up into their decision-making. There are a number of other locations. There's 2 sites in South Carolina, there's sites in Alabama, Texas, and 2 or 3 others in North Carolina. So it's not a done deal, but we're down to the final list. The decision will be made from those pre-selected locations. So we offer that JDIG's offered, we offer the incentives from the county. The county really is the agency that takes the lead on putting everything together. So as Miles mentioned, we have an individual in the tax department that works just on the applications and the management and administration of the application, because it got to the point where it couldn't be a part-time job anymore. So the county committed to having someone full-time to do that. That doesn't even include all the other people that work on it for tax listings and do an audit and everything else. We have a person that helps ensure that the applications are managed in the way they should be. In some cases, we have grant that's in a different format than a JDIG, and we have to match that. So then we at the county will go back and sometimes front the money to be taken out of their grant. We're not doing that for the JDIG. So we also use the grants in that fashion too. So we're actually taking the match out of the incentive that we're giving to them. So it does reduce their incentive a little bit, but they also get some money up front. So we have a person at the EDC that works on the applications too. If they decide to come here, or the next company decides to come here, we work with them to create what we call an economic development agreement. It's a legal instrument. We try to do it in one document, so we would have the city, whichever city that is, the county, and the company all in one document, all three execute. And that basically outlines their obligations under the grant, what they have to do. And then it has more county functions that we have to do in there. If we have to do something like an annexation, typically that gets wrapped up in there too. Whatever their obligations are on both parties, we would put that together. And so that gets wrapped up and executed. And that's a document that really sets everything out as a roadmap for them. As that moves forward, they have to then apply to the county to get the grant. The county makes sure they're in compliance with everything. It does subject the company to more scrutiny than you would normally receive to make sure that everything that you told us is there in the way it is, it should be. Then the county will help the company manage it. Then they work with the municipality to say, okay, in year 2027, here's what our anticipated payout is. So they create a spreadsheet. But as Miles mentioned, you don't pay anything until they pay first. So they pay their taxes, and we actually return that entire amount to you, but with the obligation that a certain portion of that has to go back to the company. We've calculated that for the municipality. So over the years, we've taken that burden of the administration and put that almost entirely back into the county so that we provide the municipalities with the information that they need. The grants are widely used throughout most of the municipalities in the county. We've done probably 5 or 6 with Gastonia in the last quarter, and we'll probably have a couple more coming. So this is a typical application for an expansion or a new location. I'm going to stop there and answer any questions or go into greater detail about any things that I talked about.
Any questions for Donnie so far? Okay. And just to clarify a few things, so when we say this is a level 3 grant, that's determined by the amount of investment that we project the project is going to.
So we only work off assessed tax value. Because the company came to me and said, I should get a level 4, we're close enough. Well, everybody's close enough to the next number 2.
Yes.
And it never ends. It's like having a lottery ticket, one number off, and you're like, okay, you're still off. So we're hard on those numbers. Now, if there were some unique characteristic, we have moved, in a rare circumstance, moved companies to another level. If they were going to bring an office location with them, a lot of white-collar workers, we might do that. But if it's whatever that cutoff is, that's the cutoff. And so we would oftentimes experience a 15, 20% difference between what the company invests and what the net tax assessment actually is. That usually doesn't occur so much on the building, it occurs on machinery and equipment because it depreciates before it even, as soon as it gets there, it's depreciated. And there's also certain things that we can't tax. We can't tax some of the rigging expenses or engineering or software, some things that they may be using. So we generally project somewhere in that 15 to 20% range. If it's a close number, we have one the other day that was like $14.5 million. We said we'll offer you a level 1 or 2 grant, whichever is applicable at the time of the assessment. And that way we avoid them being in default immediately if they don't hit 15 million. But we're pretty hard on that number. And so whatever the assessed value turns out to be, if it turns out to be less than that number, then they would not get a level 3, they get a level 2 grant.
Okay. And then in terms of the mechanism for collecting and dispersing it, I think you've explained it, that they pay it in, but then basically they're given back part of what they pay as part of the incentive grant, and that starts at, say, 90%, and then the percentage decreases. So we're not collecting less taxes, we're actually collecting more because they're going to be paying more taxes than what's being collected on the land at the moment, and we're basically just giving them back a portion of what they pay. We're not taking the money from
Right.
anywhere else. Is that?
Yeah, we like to say there's no cross-subsidization from one taxpayer to another. So if Miles gets a grant as a company, I'm not paying for that grant from my tax dollars. It's a reduction in net new revenue. They have to pay above what they paid the previous year. So for expansions, it's a little tricky because you have to invest above your depreciation. So let's say you had a facility and it had $1.5 million worth of depreciation, you reinvest another $1 million, you're not gonna get a grant because you're still below the number you're at. So we're not funding your depreciation, you have to have net increases in your value above depreciations. For bigger companies, that's a hard number to hit sometimes. So that way, we're always creating net new revenue.
At what point does the actual assessment occur?
There'll be a part.
It's like a relocation or expansion?
Yeah, so this is an existing building, so that building has already been assessed, and they're paying CIP on it, construction and process. So they're paying taxes on the building now. That assessment really will not change much. It'll just convert to a permanent assessment. As the machinery and equipment gets installed, they will still have to file on that, I think in September of the year, if they're not
Yeah, you have
completely
that annual
finished.
reporting to do, right?
They have to do the annual reporting, and then we usually give them what we call 2 January 1s to decide when to take the grant. Because as a company, you want to make sure that you get all the equipment in there, and it may be hard for you to do it and match up with the tax year assessment. So what you're gonna do is say, we're gonna give you 2 January 1s to make that declaration when you start. And so generally, the company wants to do that at the most optimum time. That might take them 2 tax years. And that other tax year, they're paying whatever the full tax is on it. And then once they start the declaration, you can't stop it. It has to go on. And if for some reason they move something, it gets taken out, obviously that gets taken out also.
And there's going to be an economic development agreement entered into between the company, the county, and the city, should they decide to locate here. And I would imagine they'd need to comply with the terms of that economic development agreement in order to be eligible to receive the incentive grants.
They do.
Okay.
They have to, if we put any unusual stipulations in there, it would be required to do it. It also includes other things they may have to do. For example, we have some in Gastonia who are gonna need to be annexed. That's not for us, but it's part of the agreement to say by 6 months of the receipt of the certificate of occupancy, you will have applied for annexation. So any of those other things that we may need to do are put in there. And I would encourage you to have one document. We have one municipality that likes to do their own, and that just leaves you hung out. Because if you're in our piece of it, we do all the administration, and they've chosen to go in a different direction on their grants, so we're not doing anything for them.
Well, I'm sure we could
Not to be
use,
punitive, but we're not
Yeah.
we're not in the cowboy business. If you want to be here, we're good, but if you're going to be out there on your own, we're not going to help you.
oh, no, I'm sure
Yeah.
we could use one agreement subject to, proofreading and revision. And then, just to clarify again, since you talked about other locations in the mix, obviously, if the company decides not to locate here, then all this is moot. It just
Yeah.
goes away.
When do we think they'll decide? I mean, are they close to the deciding stage?
It was supposed to have been last month.
Yeah.
If I had a nickel for every time somebody told me when they were going to make a decision, they actually,
Are we a top contender, do you think?
yes. Yeah, because you don't generally get a JDIG in North Carolina until you've narrowed it to a relatively small number of places. So it was down to 4 buildings. Belmont's the new building. There were 3 others that were existing buildings. They are cheaper, but they also have some limitations that we wouldn't have on a new facility.
And I think, I don't think we've mentioned this. This is the proposed to go in the,
I'm
that
sorry, yes, sir.
new building, the warehouse we approved off of Hickory Grove and
Yes, sir.
the Oaks, is that?
Yeah, the
Crow
Holdings
Holdings.
building off Hickory Grove Road.
Yeah. Okay, just wanted to make
Yeah.
clear. Any other questions for Donnie?
No, just a comment. I mean, you see here 346 potential new jobs to Belmont. Is that still kind of the ballpark number there that they're
Yes.
throwing around?
So what they have to do to get the JD, you have to go through a fairly formalized process. You send in a form it's a legally binding agreement that says we will create X number of jobs in these job categories. This is the salary they pay. This is when they get hired. If you fail to live up to that obligation, then generally they take the entire JDIG away from you.
Oh,
Okay.
wow, that's good.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
we've had a couple bad circumstances where things happen that if you sat down and listened to it, you're like, that makes all the sense in the world. They actually invested more money, but they lost 15 jobs because of the additional $50 million investment, and the state said, we're not going to do it.
Interesting.
Even though the impact would have been equal or not greater. So that's a very hard line on that.
There's one
no
in
wiggle room.
Forsyth County that I'm familiar with that ended up turning out not so good, but
It's hard to make one work.
Yeah.
It
And I
really
have a
is.
question, this is just for educational purposes on my behalf, but why do they not disclose their business name? Why is it always like Project Jasmine or Project?
So we do that all the time to maintain the confidentiality for the company, both for the people that work for the company and then for their competitors. You know, typically, they don't want their competitors knowing that they're going to make a move.
Sure.
It's an international company, and so they don't want someone knowing what they're planning to do, especially the foreign companies that are coming into the U.S.
Okay.
As a new market entry. So virtually everyone that we work on always has some kind of code name.
And is this, I mean, I don't know if you, manufacturing? Or?
Yeah, oh yes, absolutely, yeah.
And just to go off of what Alex had said, not 346 jobs, and I think the average salary will be somewhere in the $51,000
It is.
range. Yeah.
So it's not a distribution center.
That's what I was trying to.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Is it possible for you to mention like what this company is going to do and where they're from, their nationality?
Yeah, so it's a Chinese company that we have worked with the state on. So we're highly dependent as a local development group to have the state check the company out. So generally, that's a financial assessment by the company, because we do a lot of foreign direct investment, and it's hard to figure out. So in some cases, the state will come back and almost immediately say, we will not incentivize this project, depending on where they're from or what they think the ownership structure is. This one, they came back fairly quickly and said, we will incentivize it. So we, and by extension you, are riding on the state's coattails of their assessment of this company. And so we know who some of their customers are, and they have Fortune 500 customers that they already sell to in the U.S.
And in terms of what they do, are you allowed to?
It's
What they
it's a
manufacture.
consumer products that's made out of non-woven materials. So there's potential for some local supply too. We don't know if that would work, but there is some potential for that.
Any other questions? All right, there is no one signed up for public comment on this hearing. So there being no further questions and no further comment, I would entertain a motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Jason. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are out of public hearing. I believe in your packets, there is a resolution to approve the incentive grant, and I guess the appropriate ask at this time would be for a motion to adopt said resolution approving the incentive grants.
I'll make the motion to adopt the incentive grant resolution.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Sorry.
With the edits that you've added.
Oh, yes. I made a few edits.
With Jim's
No, yes. All right. So we took the ayes. Any opposed? All right, it passes unanimously.
I think this is good. We need industry. We need manufacturing
Manufacturing
back
especially, yeah.
in our area. I mean, I think this is an awesome opportunity. Hopefully it works out.
Well, thanks for your support. I'll probably be back again. This is usually not a one-for-one business. It may be a couple times. In fact, we have one that we'll be talking to Miles about that's 80 million. So it's not just this one, but you got to chase a bunch of them to sometimes to get it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donnie. Yep.
Thank you.
I guess just one more comment.
Sure.
In an industrial area.
Yes.
For this area. And
That's
one of
good
the
to add.
concerns in the past was distribution centers, which would put additional trucks and traffic on the road.
Yes.
With
A handful of
manufacturing.
jobs.
Correct.
I believe just based on my discussions, that this facility, if used as envisioned, would decrease the number of trucks coming and going from what, perhaps was contemplated when we originally approved the warehouse. So I figured that would be another reason why we'd be favorably disposed towards it.
Perfect. No, I just wanted to make those
Yeah.
comments. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Thank you, Donnie.
Thank you, Donnie. Thanks, Donnie.
All right, very good.
What was it?
Cleaning my glasses, I apologize.
Thank you, everyone. So next on the agenda is item C4, public hearing for TA 2024-04, smoke vape shops and cannabis dispensaries. This is a continued item from last month's meeting where we opened the public hearing. So we are already in the public hearing, and I will turn it over to our planning director, Tiffany Farrow.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. This is text amendment 2024.04 related to smoke and vape shops and dispensaries. And just to remind everyone of a little bit of the background of this item, in the October City Council workshop meeting, Council directed staff to pursue a text amendment or to research a text amendment that could consider limiting the locations for smoke shops or vape shops and dispensaries to the Wilkinson Boulevard corridor, which would also be better defined as the highway commercial zoning designation. This request was always viewed from the direction given by council as an interim step, as we all understood that the comprehensive land use plan is currently being updated and would help us to identify the best location or locations for these uses long-term. But in the interim, we wanted to be able to better define where they were desired within the city's zoning. So this item was drafted by staff and then presented as a draft text amendment to Planning Board back in November of 2024. And ultimately, after further discussion at that meeting, the item was continued for further evaluation for two main points. The first one being that Planning Board was hoping to gain a better understanding of the specific concerns and how those might need to be regulated within the Land Development Code. And then also, they had requested some feedback from Main Street Advisory Board and other downtown businesses prior to rendering any sort of recommendation. So that was their direction at the November City Council meeting to staff.
Planning board meeting.
Yes, at the Planning Board meeting in November. So staff began working on those requests, and right after the meeting, staff was made aware of legislation that actually got adopted the day before Planning Board meeting. It came to my attention later that week following the meeting. That's Senate Bill 382. So just wanted to summarize, we talked about this a little bit at the last City Council meeting when we opened the public hearing, but there have been some updates since then I wanted to share with you all. So as you may recall, Senate Bill 382 was adopted initially on November 20th, 2024, just before Thanksgiving, which had a whole bunch of different regulations within it, but as it relates to this item, the biggest impact was the expanded definition of downzoning within that law that prohibited the creation of nonconformities, specifically in non-residential zones, without the written consent of all of the affected property owners. And so we've been following the status of this bill to make sure that we understood how it may relate to the pending text amendment that we were considering. And so on November 26th, the entire Senate Bill 382 was vetoed by Governor Cooper. Then back on December 2nd, the Senate overrode the governor's veto. It went to the House for approval, and then finally on December the 11th, the House overrode the governor's veto as well, so that resulted in his veto being overturned, which led to the fact that this Senate bill is now effect and remains in effect as law, and all of the implications thereof. So with that, we shared that with Planning Board at their December 11th Planning Board meeting, and while they felt like this really should be something that was given a final determination by the city attorney as to understanding the full implications. Keep in mind, the veto was overridden on the bill the same day as the Planning Board meeting. So it was hot off the press information as to the status of this pending legislation that was then adopted into law. And so what was discussed, there was a few things discussed. One was, could the text amendment be amended to be potentially in compliance with the new legislation? But because of the very recent nature of this legislation, and because of the way that the direction was given, as well as the way that staff had originally drafted the text amendment, Planning Board did not feel comfortable recommending any modifications to the text to ultimately give you all that, and instead unanimously recommended disapproval, specifically and primarily based on the recently adopted state legislation and its implications on this item. So in that, they also made the recommendation for two findings. One, that the text amendment is therefore not a reasonable request and in the public's interest, and also that the text amendment is not consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan in the areas of community character and economy. ultimately, based on this most recent legislation by the state, staff is also recommending this evening the withdrawal of this text amendment in response to that legislation until if and when possible alternatives for handling this item are better identified in order to bring them to your attention. That being said, this is a public hearing, and that is what staff has for you this evening. I'm not sure if there's anyone signed up for public comment, but that's all I have at this time, unless you have any questions for me.
Questions for Tiffany?
Maybe towards parks. I mean, I guess you also looked into this from the legal side of it and kind of agree with the findings here?
I do agree. So one of our resources is Coates Cannon School of Government. We look to them for advice. Their initial stab at that says the North Carolina General Assembly amended state law to greatly restrict local government discretion to amend local zoning ordinances. Here's the polite part. The precise interpretation and breadth of impact of this law are not perfectly clear. One thing is clear. The law dramatically alters the authority for local governments to amend local zoning ordinances, and in particular, what Tiffany just referred to, no amendment to zoning regulations or zoning map that downzones property initiated, enacted, or enforced without the written consent of all property owners whose property is subject to the downzoning is allowed. So that's a real, it's sort of an unbelievable piece of legislation. I do think this is going to be revisited at the legislature. Our local people have indicated so. Really what happened here, as a part of the Disaster Recovery Act, I think they all circled up, and anything they had in their pocket they threw in the bill, because it goes on forever. And this is a small portion of it, but for planning and development purposes, it's a huge restriction.
So
I think it'll be modified, but right now I don't think we have any choice. I don't think we can do anything.
So let me ask you this then. What about the items or types of places that we discussed that are currently limited to the boulevard? Are those grandfathered in because
Yes.
those were done years ago?
Yeah, this would be,
My understanding was there was a look back, but it was
6 months.
6
Yeah,
months. So anything outside of that would be all right.
Yeah, this
So,
is a-
so like, my understanding is even like when we decrease the density on the peninsula, that could come within this ambit.
Right,
But
right.
because
No
we've
kidding.
done that
yeah,
many months ago,
it
it's
impacts
okay.
downzoning, density, and non-conforming uses right now, three big areas.
They've got,
And so they really, it was a
So
canon
requiring
rather
2
than-
dwelling units per
big-
acre, just as an example, on the peninsula, would fall subject into this?
Since it was originally, well,
That's
6 and
long
then
time
3 and then 2, but yes, doing that would, my understanding is that if we were to do that now, it would come within the ambit, because we already did it year plus ago, it's okay.
Here again, I believe this will come back to us. I
Yeah.
believe,
Yes.
I believe they will revisit this. I'm not sure how to end up, but I do believe for right now, we support planning staff's recommendation to withdraw this.
I would,
I have a question.
Yeah.
About, you talked about the written consents of
Yeah.
adjacent property. Can you
All-
explain that a little bit more?
no, all
So-
affected
so all-
properties.
Okay, that's what I
Everybody in
meant,
that,
like, what is that?
everybody in that zone would have to
Yeah.
agree to this,
Okay.
downzone.
so if you've got like,
Everybody that own property in highway commercial.
yeah.
Isn't that similar to like an
How's that?
annexation of like a neighborhood per se that's in the county? Let's say there's a 50 units out there that wants, like 49 of them want to be annexed, but one doesn't. You just can't
Yeah.
annex. Is that pretty much the same type of?
Sorta, yeah, but this is,
For zone?
100%,
Wow.
in that zone, which is, it's really unprecedented, I think.
I
This is
do,
a 276-page bill, disaster relief bill.
Yeah,
12 pages had to do with disaster relief.
yeah.
Sounds about right.
So our General Assembly, they have gotten a lot
Yeah.
of pushback from a lot of municipalities around the state. And some of them told me too that they expect us to come back up like right away.
yeah.
This
I-
part of it, the
Yeah.
down zoning part.
I know Jason and I have both talked to our local delegation, and I think that's certainly my impression, and I'm assuming yours as well, that they said they would expect this to be revisited as soon as,
Maybe they go
possible.
back,
Yeah.
But you're right, I don't think we have a choice.
Yeah.
But
I do, just out of curiosity, I know, since I was at the meeting, Main Street sort of, in light of all this, Main Street Board deferred any sort of opinion or position until, if and when this ever comes back in light of the current bill. But the survey, it sounds like, was completed. What did the survey of downtown businesses indicate, if you recall?
Sure. Cassidy, there are some slides on there that are hidden, and I'm happy to
Oh,
share
wow,
those.
we've unlocked the hidden slides. It's like the,
This
I-
is what you
look,
call Pandora's
After you all were patient with me at the last workshop meeting, and I
Mm.
wanted to make sure I was as concise as possible.
I
So
see. Well, this is
I
like
have information if
the
you
Mario
wanted
Brothers
that.
Yeah, you
cheat
just
codes,
unlocked
like the
the-
secret world or the warp zone to level 6 or something.
The dark web.
All right. All right, sorry. We gotta go through. Sorry. Uh-oh, trackpad. Let me see.
Oh, here it is.
There we go. All right. So what we did is, in order to try to get as efficient of feedback as possible, is we put together a pretty short survey and then asked Cassidy to share it with Main Street and some downtown business owners as requested by Planning Board. So you see here, we'll start with the first question: should vape, smoke shops, or dispensaries be defined as a distinct use to be regulated within the city? It was pretty close here, but the top winner was no, they should be viewed as the same as any other retail business. But again, it was a 45-54 split. Identify any concerns you may have with vape or smoke shops or dispensaries that should be considered when identifying allowable locations. You can see the responses there to the right, the top two being public safety and community character. And then we did allow people to provide some other responses, and you can see those on your screen as well.
So roughly how many respondents?
I am
Basically
going
the sum of all those? Is
Of
that
the
right?
sum of all those, I want to say it was just under 40, if
And
I
are these-
recall.
Are these just property owners, or?
Like I said, it was shared with Main Street as well as the property owners and business owners, right? Business owners.
So,
But what's
to your point, though, to the law, is it not the property owners
Correct.
that have to sign this?
Yes.
So,
Even if one of those was a smoke and vape shop, they would have to sign off on themselves being downzoned, right?
The property owners are the ones that have to agree,
right,
not the
Business
occupants.
Not the occupant.
Right.
so, but these were the business owners, not the property owners.
I'll defer to
I guess that's what I'm
Cassidy.
trying to understand.
So that may skew it just a bit.
Right, so again, it was based on the directed feedback or request of planning board. It's not to say that it was a comprehensive survey in any nature, but this is just the feedback we got on that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure, how we wanted to view that information this
So-
evening.
This is kind of interesting. So the second largest vote up here, you got public safety concerns, underage access, criminal activity. So we may not be able to regulate the properties themselves or where they can go, but, and again, I'm kind of talked with someone else about this as well, but a couple years ago, did we not do something in regards to short-term rentals, in regards to kind of issues that may pop up or arise? We did a 3-strike rule. I believe Shelley came up with some type of text or,
I don't recall the 3-strike rule, but there is some special regulation in Chapter 6 related to short-term rentals that better defines and regulates that specific use. And we do have, in that chapter, we do have uses that have special regulations contained within them. So like I said, that it was so new when we came to planning board. It's not to say that nothing can be done. We just want to have the opportunity to evaluate and research what we still may have the authority to better define or regulate within our community based on that new state legislation. And it is possible. We can look at Chapter 6 to see if there are opportunities that might not be considered down zoning, but that might better define certain types of uses. But I haven't been able to research the full implications or opportunities there.
I don't know if the rest of council would be interested in that, but if you look at this, again, I don't know who did the survey. It wasn't the property owners, or the business owners / property owners, I guess. But the second highest scoring there, you see the public safety concerns, which is kind of one of the issues that was originally brought up when this text amendment came up. So I don't know if it would be interesting to look into something similar we did to the short-term rentals in regards to, and I can't remember the language, this was a couple years ago off the top of my head, but it was in regards to if the police get called or first responders get called, if there's any violations or anything like that, the city then has some actionable recourse or something.
And I think
to
that might go
nature.
beyond zoning, if I recall correctly, so I would probably defer to the police department on that. Once we allow for a certain land use, the enforcement is primarily done through code enforcement, through Lindsay. In partnership with us, if we become aware of it, we certainly will reach out and do our best to first notify and see if we can get corrective action to occur prior to any sort of written documentation. But we can certainly look into that, as well as any potentials for further defining criteria within Chapter 6 that may be allowable.
I don't know, what do y'all think?
I mean, obviously
totally-
explore all
Mhm.
opportunities, I guess.
I'm down to
It's
explore
good
all
data
options.
to have to see
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
other potential workarounds there may be based on the current law as
Sure.
it is today.
Mhm.
But at the same time, there's not a whole lot we can do about it currently. To me, it's more kind of status quo until they may choose
Yeah.
to revisit this.
As far as text.
I mean, I think
Well,
we,
as far as what is on paper, but there's potential into this, if we look into the short-term rental language that we,
Well, that's what I was saying. There may be another workaround.
Yeah.
right, but I understand what Jason's saying. For today's purposes,
yeah,
I think we're at a dead end.
I don't
But,
disagree.
yeah, I do, and I just was, this is interesting stuff, 'cause
No,
I
it
wanted
is
to see
interesting.
what the sentiment was.
All right, the next question we asked was, anytime we ask about concerns, we also ask about opportunities. Please identify any opportunities you have, that you may have or see with vape smoke shops or dispensaries, that we should also consider. A lot of folks said that they didn't see opportunities, that was 43%. But the next highest was that it would provide some additional choice in shopping and services, that was at 36%. And you can see there was quite, a good number of other provided in there. Everything from it should not be on Main Street to positive medicinal alternatives, education and transparency, community wellness, alcohol or reduced alcohol consumption, undesirable customer base. So a wide range of feedback amongst those surveyed. Should Belmont consider adding additional performance standards for vape smoke shops? This goes back to potentially looking at Chapter 6 and those standards that are outlined there. And if so, which ones? The top two were proximity to schools and proximity to public parks.
Now, is that also within this downzoning situation? If there were, let's say, language in regards to restricting it to how close it can be to a school?
I'm not sure, and I think that it's really going to come down to whether or not in doing so it creates a new nonconformity. And so I'd want to make sure that Parks and I could communicate and evaluate if there were any of these existing uses within our community today, if we added any language that would then be written in a way that would cause those businesses to then be deemed nonconforming, because that would be considered a downzoning.
Yeah, and that's not the intended purpose here. I mean, I think the intended purpose is trying to get ahead of something, but again, I think we've seen, 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that, coming to downtown Belmont, so.
Sure. So those were the top two there. You can see a little bit of additional feedback as well. And then, should vape smoke shops and dispensaries be limited to Wilkinson Boulevard? We have a larger split here of 62% saying yes and 37% saying no.
Hold on, can you go back to that?
Yes.
62% of people were saying, yes, it should be restricted to the boulevard.
Yes.
Out of how many? 32?
Out of, I believe it was 37, but I don't want to say that's
5, Skip.
100%
Yes, that's correct.
accurate.
Kind of conflicting with the first one.
And then I have these if you all are interested. They're just the standard text here. Do you have any additional feedback you'd like to share with Planning Board or City Council as they consider these? And we did have quite a few responses. There's this page as well as that one. And happy to provide these if you're interested in this feedback.
Can you go back to your first secret slide there with the, I think it was the first question you had?
Absolutely.
Secret slide.
Yeah, I just want to read that question.
So, yeah, that's interesting. So the majority of people say no, they shouldn't be regulated, but then the last one is that
They
the
should be on
overwhelming
Boulevard.
majority says they should be restricted to the boulevard.
And that's where you get with, that's where it comes into play with the wording of the question is kind of what I was looking at.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, these were not written by a professional survey writer. These were written by a planning staff member, AKA me. And so I'm not, was not trained in how to write survey questions, but wanted to make sure that I could provide that quick turnaround as Planning Board had
Good.
requested.
What are the boundaries of the respondents? I mean, was it just, okay, and remind me what, like, where does that stop and start?
The historic portion typically runs Main Street from Wood Road to just past Little Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
The Purple District from Catawba at Main out to Park and Keener.
Okay, so it stops at Park and Keener.
And
Okay.
then the east end would be from Park and Keener down to just about the end.
So East End was included too. I see. Okay.
So there were only 5 questions and then one for open-ended feedback. Again, if you all are interested, happy to provide these as a PDF as follow-up.
Yeah, if you don't
they're
mind
here.
sharing that, that would be.
And under the,
Yep, absolutely.
the new law, every one of those would have to say no, right? Is that the way to read? Okay.
Well, some of these might be the business owners, so
Right,
it would really
the
depend
property
on the
owners.
property owners themselves.
But clearly, there's a split, regardless of
Yeah.
whether it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's,
Yeah.
it's not anywhere near unanimity on either way, and obviously some strong opinions on both sides. So I feel like, first of all, any other questions for Tiffany? There's no one signed up for public comment in connection with this hearing. So
Motion to come out.
I'll take a motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion to come out of public hearing?
Motion made by Jason,
Second.
seconded by Catherine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we're out of public hearing. Now, you see what's in red there. I tend to think that that's what we should do for purposes of this exercise, based, as Jason said, and Parks has said, based on what the law provides. I think we need to withdraw this text amendment for now. That's not to say that we can't explore other options,
Right.
because I am curious as to the question, you know, can the language be altered in a way that would come within the existing law? That needs to be explored, but my understanding is even if we wanted to come back to this, we'd have to start over anyway, so we might as well just withdraw this one and start from scratch. However, we might end up wanting to proceed, so I just think
So
that
we
makes
couldn't
sense.
continue this to try to get additional clarification as opposed to going all the way back to step 1?
I think, well,
Well, you've already come out of public hearing, but if you were going to continue it, staff had thought that this is gonna take some time to
Mhm.
clear up.
And we don't know when.
And I think even your tweak, as far as what you're exploring, all that, their definition of downzoning was so broad that it's gonna cast a wide net. So I think you're probably gonna not be able to go that route. And so I think staff wanted to say, instead of continuing, we don't know how long
Yeah.
We do expect this can be revisited, we expect it'll be changed, but let's see how that all plays out, and then we come back and start. It's not that long a process.
Thanks, Parks.
In that case, I would be willing to entertain a motion to withdraw this text amendment.
I'll make a motion to withdraw text amendment 2024.04.
All right, motion made by Jason,
Second.
seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the text amendment is unanimously withdrawn. Thank you.
Thank you.
One question.
Sure.
You said this bill provides a 6-month look back?
That was my
From
understanding.
things that had already been passed.
So like if
Like
we had
what it-
passed,
That's
if
what,
we
that
had
was, that was
passed,
leading to my next question.
yeah.
Is there anything that,
No, not
that has been
prospects.
impacted? Okay.
no.
Okay, cool.
But like if we had passed this, say, in October, it still would have been, yeah. All right, moving along now to item C5, public hearing for TA 2024-05 events facilities. I will entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
Motion to go into public hearing.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Catherine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now in public hearing, and once again, we have Tiffany to present the staff report.
Perfect. Oh, sorry. This item is text amendment 2024.05, titled Event Facilities. And this text amendment comes before you this evening because we received a text amendment application from CJ Vandiver, who is the owner of Catawba Mills Antique Mall here in Belmont. The text amendment was specifically requesting that we add events facilities as a permitted use within the neighborhood center commercial zoning designation, which is outlined in Chapter 5. So just a little bit of background about events facilities and where our ordinance currently allows for them. They are already allowed in general residential and neighborhood center residential as long as there is an approved special use permit. And then they are allowable to be approved by planning staff in highway commercial, business campus development, and institutional campus development zones. There are some special regulations for this use outlined in Chapter 6. Those are seen at the bottom of the screen. One is that they must be located or have direct access to an arterial or collector street. And the other is that in a GR district, as shared on the chart as well, that it has to be at least 2 acres and may only be allowed through a special use permit. So that's within Chapter 6. The other is if you scan through Chapter 5 and the processes for approval there. But you can see that on the list, neighborhood center commercial is not one of those zones where events facilities is specifically listed as a permitted use today in the Land Development Code. So there are, however, a lot of other commercial uses that are outlined as allowed in neighborhood center commercial, and I included this chart on your screen, and a lot of those are allowed to be approved at the staff level or administratively, including offices, commercial uses, restaurants, funeral homes, convenience stores, neighborhood stores, daycare centers. There are a couple uses that require a special use permit. One of those is a drive-through commercial facility, and then another is a private nightclub. Both of those require special consideration by city council, but everything else that is listed as permitted in neighborhood center commercial is allowed to be done by staff approval as long as it meets all of the requirements of the code. There are some commercial uses that are not currently permitted downtown, both in neighborhood center commercial as well as downtown district or any of our downtown uses. These are uses that are only permitted in highway commercial zones. So similar to the text amendment we were just recently discussing or the intent behind that. And some of these specifically listed uses that are only allowed in highway commercial include entertainment uses, adult establishments, video stores, automotive or heavy equipment, manufactured home sales and service, blood plasma, ABC package stores, body piercing, cash advance vehicle title loan service, electronic gaming operations, palm reading and fortune telling, pawn shops, tattoo parlors, permanent cosmetics, and event facilities.
And when you say not permitted, I just want to be clear because as I read the code right now, it doesn't specifically say in so many words, event facilities are not permitted in neighborhood commercial. It's because it's defined, and then that term is used specifically in the highway commercial and not used anywhere else, that's where you interpret that.
That's correct.
Yes.
So the way that we interpret our ordinance is if a use is specifically listed as permitted in one of our zones, if it's excluded from the permitted uses list in the other ones, it's interpreted as not allowable in those zones. We don't have like what some communities have is a really detailed permitted uses chart, and that's because we have a form-based code, but there are specific uses that we felt like over time needed further regulation or to specifically be called out and designated within certain areas of our community. And so the list that you have on the screen are some of those, and these are ones that are allowable primarily in the highway commercial district only.
And I will also, in case, I don't think you had mentioned this, but while events facility is not listed as a permitted use in neighborhood commercial and downtown district, if you look at the performance standards in 6.2.10,
yes.
it actually does say NCC and DD, which are those zoning designations, which creates sort of an ambiguity.
It does create some confusion and
Yes.
ambiguity, yes. And so we were actually, I had not realized that before the applicant brought it to our attention through the filing of this text amendment. And so we welcome the opportunity to clean this up and to clarify it within the Land Development Code, for sure. So,
Wait, can you go back?
yes,
Tiffany? So currently we're saying event facilities are not allowed in the downtown district. Is that
that's correct.
correct?
Based on
So-
what the language in the Land Development Code is.
So, okay, but was it just overlooked, I guess? Like, think of Ten Catawba, I don't know if you remember that. But that was specifically an
married.
event facility where Jekyll and Hyde is now.
Yeah.
I think they still utilize the upstairs for event facilities.
Yes, I had my wedding rehearsal.
My
there.
sister had her rehearsal dinner
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
So,
It
is that-
becomes a little bit tricky,
It was
and
like a
I wish that I
club where you
had.
had to pay like a membership too, though. Remember, it was like one of those deals where you had to pay like the $1 membership just so they could consider it a club.
Oh, like a
which I think
private,
did mean-
like a private bar or restaurant.
Well,
right.
no, they rented the facility out, is what I'm saying. So what
So
I'm
there's
saying
a few
is,
things that happen sometimes, and I don't know the individual history of each one of those uses. And the first thought that comes to my mind is that because it's listed in chapter 6 in the list, that's not where we define our permitted uses, but it's listed almost as if it used to be allowable within those zones. I've tried to look through the history of our text amendments, and I haven't found the documentation that shows when those might have been eliminated, but that doesn't mean it wasn't. It just means it was likely before my tenure, and I would need to do further digging. But because there's this pending text amendment to correct it, we thought instead of spinning our wheels, we'd just bring it before you. But it is possible that that use used to be allowable both in neighborhood center commercial and downtown district, and then at some point over time, the ordinance could have gotten amended to eliminate those uses in that district. And I cannot find the history of that. The other things that sometimes happen over time is that as businesses grow, normally when a business gets initially established, it's top of mind to come through planning and zoning, you get your building permits, you do all of those things. Once your business is established and you have a space and it's functioning, sometimes business needs demand creativity. And so sometimes what happens is if a space can be used for a different use, but it doesn't need a whole lot of modifications, I don't believe it's intentional, but sometimes those uses get activated out of needing and necessitating ongoing business operations without sometimes consulting the planning department. Not saying that's intentional, but sometimes that does happen. And so I can't say definitively what has occurred over time as to how events facilities have been operational in downtown, but this text amendment would potentially allow us the opportunity to clear that up, and if we are supportive of those uses within the downtown, to be able to define that so that they are in compliance with the Land Development Code.
I mean, I don't have any issues with it. I was just curious.
I was
because-
as well, and I tried to do some research to be able to get to the root cause of where that discrepancy in chapter 6 really rooted from, and I have not yet found it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so ultimately, this was presented to Planning Board at the December 11th meeting. And Planning Board unanimously recommended to approve the text amendment as submitted by the applicant, but with some modifications that I'll go over here shortly. The primary reason for them proposing modifications is that the applicant's text amendment application only included neighborhood center commercial. And as Jim pointed out, downtown district was originally included in the list that's noted in chapter 6. And so they said, well, if we're talking about including events facilities downtown, the recommendation was that it be expanded to both of the zones that apply downtown. On our zoning map, downtown district, there are a couple that are done by right, but primarily downtown district zones are established through conditional zoning. So it's not a large spread area, but they did want to make sure that we were thorough and included both of the zoning designations downtown. They, with the modifications I'm about to share with you, did also recommend that your approval and consideration, noting that they would see this text amendment as reasonable and in the public interest and consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. So those modifications ultimately lead to the proposed text as follows. In chapter 5.6, you can see the proposal for events facility to be added under permitted uses in neighborhood center commercial, and that they would also need to comply with the performance standards as outlined in chapter 6. And then in chapter 5.7, downtown district, them also be listed under permitted uses in this as well. Staff would like to apologize. There was a little bit of an error on our part in terms of the initial location for this red line text. So I passed out an amendment that matches what you're seeing on your screen that notes that events facilities would be added to permitted uses, not to where they were in your packet, which were mistakenly dragged under excluded uses. You can see without the bold, those all blur together, and it can become a little bit challenging. And so Mayor Pro Tem kindly pointed that to our attention, and that this is the intent of the planning board in their motion. It is now in front of you as presented on the screen for the public as well, and they are recommending adding it into downtown district as a permitted use, also subject to the performance standards in chapter 6. And then for clarity in chapter 6, this is that list. You can see here that all of those zoning designations as they're recommending are already there. We are suggesting adding some stars just for clarity and consistency with how things are already formatted in chapter 6. That would note that a special use permit would only be required for these facilities within general residential and neighborhood center residential, even though all events facilities, regardless of their need for a special use permit, would need to comply with bullets A and B as listed below. So this is more of a clerical revision to the text. And so with those modifications as presented before you this evening, we ask that you receive staff report and planning board's recommendation, any public comments, and make a decision. I would note that the applicant is here as well if you would like to speak to the applicant about their request, and ultimately are seeking a motion to approve as presented, modified, or disapprove, and then make the required findings.
Thank you. Any questions for Tiffany? I have a couple. Just if you could confirm that events facility is in fact defined in the definition section of the code?
It is defined in chapter 2.
Okay, thank you. And I believe there is some discussion about parking at the planning board meeting.
Yes.
Ultimately, it was decided that that was not a significant enough concern to justify making it a special use permit. I was just wondering, what exactly are the parking requirements for events facilities in the neighborhood commercial district then?
Sure. All right, I had these. And
Did we unlock
set of hidden
Oh,
the hidden slides?
It's hidden slides.
Wow.
I do have them because it depends on what the actual uses are
400
within.
square feet, isn't that what it is? One spot per 400 square feet?
Well, for assembly spaces, so if the events facility includes an assembly space, it's a 1 per 4 seats ratio. So there are a couple in there, and let me see where I put them. Again, I was trying to make sure we.
Yeah, that's on page
Stay
87.
there. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there we
Events
go.
facilities, so there are 3 parking delineators we would typically look at when we are evaluating events facilities. It just depends on the type of facility, right? So a theater would be a 1 per 3 seats ratio in terms of parking requirements. If it's a civic use or assembly for that, it's 1 per 4 seats, and then commercial or office uses, types assemblies, or for-profit type uses would be 1 per 400 square feet.
Okay.
So it just depends on the type of events facility, on which parking ratio we would use. And sometimes there are events facilities that by their nature of how they are using the space might have a combination of those, and they would need to define those and how they'd be applied. And what we do for assembly is we align with the building code's definition of assembly and how they would apply building code standards to those spaces. And then we would utilize those to say that those spaces would also meet the same parking standard.
And I see on your slide that you had suggested that the parking concerns might warrant a case-by-case review through the SUP process, but obviously the planning board did not agree with that.
Sure, so staff recommended that that could be an option because as you can see on some of the other slides, special use permits are utilized in some of the other zones for events facilities and are utilized for other commercial uses within neighborhood center commercial as well. But ultimately through discussion, it was voiced that that could place an undue burden on the applicants for events facilities, as especially small independent business owners that might want to invest in our downtown. And so it's they noted that it's not just the fees that would be placed by the city of Belmont for application and the time and everything else that that process itself would require, because special use permits do come before city council and they do require advertising in the paper and all of those things. It's not just that, but it's also that most times when somebody pursues a special use permit, they are also hiring an attorney, so there's also a significant cost if they elected to do that before coming before you. So cost and impact on small businesses was certainly one voiced concern of planning board, but they also felt like with the findings of special use permits that those ultimately would be filtered out through the vetting of making sure that they have all of the required parking, and any use that was not able to provide proof that they had adequate parking for an events facility would need to go through some sort of conditional zoning process for relief anyway. So they felt like that was enough due diligence where they did not feel like a special use permit would be needed. And also in looking back at the, at the uses here, here you can see that it's primarily the residential zones that required the special use permit, where the primarily commercial zones in our town allowed that without needing one.
Well, we also have language in here, right, that must be located on or have direct access to basically a major artery, right?
That's
or
correct.
road infrastructure.
That's
so
correct.
assuming that you would have potentially public parking within that infrastructure, right? Potentially.
I mean, we also have provisions in our code that allow for shared parking. So if there's a church nearby that's not needing that for the same time as an event, there are opportunities to utilize existing on-the-ground parking that wouldn't necessarily be public parking in order to support ongoing business operations.
Any other questions for Tiffany? All right, we do have one person signed up for public comment. That is the applicant, CJ Vandiver. If there's no further questions from Tiffany, we can hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council members. I'm CJ Vandiver, 406 Catawba Street in Belmont. I'm very happy so far about how this is going. We have been, in 5 days, it will be a year since our business has been suspended due to some things like not knowing kind of what Tiffany said. A lot of it was survivalist. We opened a business 11 years ago, me and my late husband, and we operated our business the best way we knew how. And like she said, no intent to do something wrong, but just a way to keep the doors open. I'm in a situation now, we have been out of business for a year in the events part of it. And the sad and unfortunate thing is that if it doesn't return, I will have to shut the doors of the antique mall. I don't want to do that, but I have been funding it myself for a few months because of being shut down. it's something that the community needs. We've provided charitable events. We've given our space up for Least of These of Carolinas. We've done church or things for our community. We've obviously done weddings for people in our community, anniversary parties, birthday parties, whatever we can do. We just wanted to be a place where people could come close by and have an event. We want to do more of corporate things now. So there is an idea that, we've been asked, could we do corporate events? So these are some things that we want to do moving forward. We have hired an architect to go over the building to, fine-tooth comb it and make sure that we are doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. So there are some things that we have to modify, but they're very, very mild, changing the swing of doors and hardware and stuff like that. But we're just asking that you look favorably on this, because we do think we offer a nice, unique service to this community, a space where you can go and celebrate, and you don't have to go to Charlotte. Nothing against Charlotte, but yay,
Understood.
Yay, Belmont.
We get that.
Yeah,
We get that.
yeah. But that's pretty much everything I have, and I came in under time.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
unusual. Thank you.
Thank you. There being no other public comment, unless there's any other questions or presentation, I think it would be appropriate for a motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
A motion by Alex,
Second.
second by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are out of public hearing, which then brings us to item C6, consider ordinance of approval for TA 2024-05 events facilities. Did you have
I was just going to
anything?
note, you did make a couple of minor modifications, so
Yes.
I have those revisions as well.
Okay, the big one obviously being moving events facility from the excluded uses in
Yes.
downtown district to the permitted uses.
Yes.
I will also say, obviously, just to be mindful when we take the vote, that Ms. Vandiver was the one who originated this text amendment. Obviously, she spoke about her business, but when we do zoning, we need to think of, if we were to approve this, anyone who wanted to have an events facility in these zoning districts would be, following these procedures as well. So just be mindful of that. But
Wouldn't this technically be needed as well for the trolley?
Yeah.
Trolley barn, is it
Mm.
event
Yeah.
space?
Yeah.
Good point.
yeah.
And then also, wasn't there a proposal at one time, which I don't think is alive anymore, to turn City Hall into a event space or something like that?
Well, maybe. I don't know if that ever really got much
Got
traction.
It didn't get any traction, but I'm
Yes.
just saying.
Yes.
that-
Yes,
Well,
but
yeah.
all I'm saying is, like, we need to, let's just be certain that when we do this, it's a more general, notwithstanding any specific
Yeah,
discussion
I
or,
understand.
yeah, that's all I'm saying.
I was just giving examples.
Yes. So if there's any further discussion, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve this ordinance as modified.
I'll make the motion to approve this ordinance as modified.
I'll second.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Catherine. All those in favor? Aye. Any
I-
opposed? Passes unanimously. Now we need a
I
second.
will also make a motion that this achieves both goal number 2 and 4, 2 being economy. The text amendment supports employment and commerce by adding a new commercial use to downtown. Goal number 4, community character. The text amendment use promotes economic diversity and protects community character.
Motion made by Alex,
Second.
seconded by Jason. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The consistency findings pass unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Tiffany.
All right, very good. So that brings us to C7, right-of-way reservations, text amendment status update. And I believe we have Reagan Murphy from the Planning Department to present on that.
That's correct. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. And this is simply an update on a conversation that we had a couple months ago. Let's see, we can go to the next slide. So over the fall, we heard from a couple council members who had concerns about whether our current land development code is strict enough in terms of requiring right-of-way designations, particularly from new developments, for future road widening projects and other transportation improvements that are in our adopted plans. So in our October 21st council workshop, we talked through a number of different text amendments, some of which have come up tonight, but one of those text amendments that y'all requested that staff look into was a potential text amendment about right-of-way reservations to see if our current ordinance was strict enough or if we needed to look at adding additional language to strengthen our ability to reserve right-of-way for future road improvements. So I want to, and to jump kind of to the, to cut to the chase, staff is recommending that our current ordinance language is strong enough to preserve the right-of-way that's needed while also striking that balance of respecting individual property owners' rights and making sure that we're not taking an extraordinarily large amount of right-of-way from a front setback without knowing the extent of property that's needed. So our current LDC references this topic in a couple of locations, primarily in Chapter 16, which is where we flesh out our development plan requirements. So in Section 1 of Chapter 16 requires that all development plans need to comply with our adopted public plans, including the Land Development Code and all of the standards and specifications where therein. It also addresses the need for bike paths, sidewalks, pedestrian paths, greenways, and so on. So not just roadway infrastructure, but also the need for pedestrian, cyclist, and public transportation infrastructure as included on our public adopted plans as well. In Section 4, which deals with conformance with our adopted plans, this is, I think, the section that has the most teeth and really deals specifically with what y'all were hoping to get at or hoping to ensure is covered in our code. Whenever a proposed new development includes part of a proposed city street or thoroughfare that's adopted either under the thoroughfare plan by the city or as part of an adopted NCDOT or GCL MPO plan or any other transportation plan adopted by the city, that developer needs to plat a right-of-way for that planned street or thoroughfare in the width that's designated based on our ordinance's requirements and our design standards for the type of road that's proposed there. And in most cases, the developer shall be required to construct that proposed street, not just designate the right-of-way. We do have some options for payments in lieu, depending on the particular instance, but in general, they have to plat the right-of-way and they must make those transportation improvements as well. And under our section dealing with transportation impact analyses, developers are required to either comply with our adopted plans or in instances where they're proposing a different alternative, they have to provide a mitigation alternative that is determined to be equal or better to the improvements that are included in the adopted plans. And the city, as well as NCDOT, have final determination over whether those alternative mitigations are considered to be equal or better. So we have the opportunity to review if a developer does propose to deviate from an adopted plan, to confirm that that infrastructure improvement is still going to meet the needs of the intended proposed infrastructure. I also wanted to note just our TIA requirements. So the threshold for transportation impact analysis is if a project is going to generate 1,000 daily trips or 100 trips during either the AM or PM peak period. And that's reduced to half of those amounts for areas on the South Point Peninsula. So anywhere south of the intersection of South Point Road and Nixon Road in Arl Stowe. And we also require that in any TIA report that's completed, they have to include a statement of compliance. So they have to verify explicitly the degree of compliance with our adopted plans and adopted infrastructure. And then another section, just wanted to bring this up as well. In Chapter 8, we require that streets are planned with due regard to those designated corridors, again, as mentioned before, on those adopted public plans by us as well as the Gaston Cleveland Lincoln MPO. They have to comply with the design and construction standards set forth in the code, which those standards do provide design standards for the right-of-way widths that must be reserved for those streets, depending on the expected traffic volumes, the anticipated number of lanes, and so on. And minor variations to those cross-sections may be permitted at the discretion of the planning director, but the one area where discretion is not permitted is in right-of-way widths. So they can, within that right-of-way, make small adjustments to the width of the pavement, the width of planting strips between sidewalks and where the pavement begins, but generally they have to preserve the total right-of-way width. So all of that being said, I wanted to just also recap, based on our future transportation map that's part of our adopted 2018 comprehensive land use plan, there are a number of roads that are proposed to be widened as part of that future transportation map. I will note none of these are funded under the 2024 North Carolina State Transportation Improvement Program. So although they are proposed and part of an existing plan, none of these are currently funded, and so there's no necessary timeline for completion of these widening projects. But within our jurisdiction, there are, I believe it's 9 or 10 facilities that are proposed to be widened to add a turn lane, to add additional travel lanes in one direction or another, and or to add safety improvements in the means of medians, turn pockets, and so on. So with all of that, I think that's my last slide, but wanted to just open it up for discussion from you all. I can answer any other questions you might have, but wanted to just put forward that we believe the text in the current LDC is sufficient to meet those needs. We also, through the approach of conditional zoning, when developers come through that way, we have additional means to negotiate additional right-of-way beyond the minimum standards that are specified in our code as needed. But we also just want to be aware of how much right-of-way we're asking for when we don't have preliminary engineering done for some of these roadways. I will note we did some just brief research into some of our peer communities and how their code handles this topic as well. We looked at Davidson, Cornelius, and the town of Matthews, and all three of their ordinances or land development codes reference this topic in a very similar way. They do not go so far as to require, a certain portion of right-of-way above and beyond what's going to be required based on their design standards. So they refer mostly to those adopted plans and, lean on the preliminary engineering then to offer the opportunity to negotiate additional right-of-way if and when it's needed. So with all of that, I'm happy to take your questions and seek kind of your guidance to staff on this topic.
Look, I just have one, and why I brought this up is if you go down, it's interesting, 2018 Comprehensive Land Use Plan, South Point Road, 4-lane divided. ISI, you look at that whole kind of intersection there where we have built or have allowed people to build right against that road. Now granted, we have a potential project coming through that will widen that area, and it sounds like there's a path forward, but there was almost not a path forward, and that's a major thoroughfare, in my opinion, for Belmont. So obviously, in my opinion, what we have is not necessarily sufficient
Yep.
for what the need is. And we need to kind of look ahead. This isn't today, this is looking ahead to ensure that these major roads are protected. Take, over there, Lower Armstrong area, where they're building the McLean developments, very close to the roads. So we have examples that have been built since then or whatnot that could potentially pose an issue. So that's why I brought this up, and I think there should be something to move forward on in regards to this.
I would agree with that. If the land development code were sufficient as it relates to right-of-way designations, that's one problem area. The other one that we often refer to is Imperial Loss. Not that there's any planned widening of, I guess that would be South Main, but if there was, we don't have right-of-way there to do any kind of widening to speak of.
Yeah.
How does that happen if the land development code is sufficient to allow for?
Well, it might allow for it, but was it utilized, I guess is the question.
Right.
If the tools are there, whether those tools were used in the past, I think is what you're taking issue with.
Well, that's the governing document, is it not?
It's a governing document, but it's, it allows for that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the people at that time who were in the position to do so took advantage of that. In other words, I'm not sure what else could be added to give you what, I think it's already there. It's just the problem wasn't enforcement. Yeah, the problem was how it was implemented.
But at whose discretion is that?
Well, it would be.
It would be up to typically the project planner on each individual project, and then up to the planning director's discretion.
And it could be ultimately up to us if.
Especially in the case of conditional zoning. Right,
Yeah.
or a special use.
And because I know planning boards brought that up. They brought that up with Smith Farm, I think. That was, planning board said, well, what about this is awfully close, we want to widen South Point Road. So, I guess that's what I'm struggling with, because if it's already in there.
It's not the same standard applied to every
Yeah,
one of
it's
these. Like
the-
Smith Farm, to me, was done correctly. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
So, that's where I guess I'm having a little bit of a disconnect, because I don't disagree with what you want.
But and it wasn't necessarily every development. It's where we identify it on a major road or so. And I remember at some point during the last discussion, we were going to potentially look into a survey, some type of study to identify this. Well, we have this from the MPO, I would assume. What they kind of categorize is major roads or major. I don't understand why we can't utilize that, and if a development is on that road that is identified by the MPO, that there should be additional requirements and/or checks to ensure that we're not building right up against the road to prevent any type of future widening projects.
I'll disagree with that.
For sure. Absolutely. One thing that we could look into, if y'all are committed to kind of seeing additional restrictions or regulations around this in the code, is we do have collector streets as identified by the MPO, identified in our code, and we could look at potentially like an overlay district similar to some of our existing overlay districts, where if a road is at a certain threshold of a classification, it requires additional, sensitivity around right-of-way reservation or something similar to that. I think that's probably the smoothest way forward, just to address the need for, if we feel that the existing language is not sufficient or doesn't have enough teeth to address this issue.
Again, I personally don't. I can't speak for the rest.
I agree with you. I think you said it best, where we need to be proactive instead of reactive. We gotta start looking down the road, no pun intended.
I'm fully with you guys as well. I don't think it should be an option.
I guess the question
what do
is
we do?
whether the code itself is sufficient, like you said, and it's purely enforcement or abiding by the code, or if we feel like there's still some deficiencies in the code itself.
Tiffany,
I'm going to defer to Tiffany briefly.
Sure. So I just wanted to say, as the planning director, I can't necessarily speak for those in my position before me, but I will take direction from council. I asked Reagan to look into this specifically because Reagan recently joined our team as a transportation planner. And the reason why I felt like this as the director was really important and critical for where we are in Belmont is because the reality is we have so many things going on, both with growth and development as a whole, with long-range planning as well as things coming through the door, that oftentimes when we are reviewing codes, while we do our very best to be as diligent as possible, we have planners with different levels of experience, and transportation is often not the focus of any one person dedicated. This is the first time we've ever, in the course of the planning department here in Belmont, had a transportation-specific position through Reagan, and so I am confident that her expertise and ability to be able to focus on transportation and do so for every single plan review that walks through our door will provide us a higher level of oversight and due diligence for every project to make sure that things are not overlooked that might be allowable within our land development code, but might have been overlooked by an entry-level planner in the past or something else. I'm not, we are human at the end of the day, and things do happen. The other thing I would also ask for you to keep in mind is that there are projects where we have known issues, and some of those were actually planned and approved prior to the adoption of the 2018 plan that outlines this list of corridors. So McLean, for instance, that project was originally approved in 2013 and done so through conditional zoning. So this list, to be able to compare through with the most recent adopted plans, wasn't there for projects like McLean. I'm not saying that it wasn't there for all of our projects today, but it was there for projects like Smith Farm, right, where we knew. And so we have examples both of where we have success as well as where we have room for improvement and lessons learned. But I do want to say that we've heard, and we want to continue to listen to council on how we can move forward with protecting transportation corridors and investing in our transportation network to the best of our ability. And I'm really excited to have Reagan join the team, both to focus on this topic and dive in really detailed for us, as well as to make sure that if there were any oversights in the past, that we can do our best to avoid those in the future. But if you guys have recommendations of things we can do to beef up the text, to be more diligent, we certainly want this to be conversational and to hear from you on how to do that.
I don't disagree, and Reagan, glad to have you for sure, but again, Jason, sorry, but I said this, I mentioned it last time, if we look at the major corridors, link it to MPO, I'm not saying, you could leave, someone else could come in. Like, we're not constants, but what can be a constant, unless the council decides to change it, is the code and the text amendments here. And that's to safeguard for the future.
Sure.
That's just kind of where I'm trying to come from. I didn't mean to cut you off, Jason.
No, Tiffany, I appreciate you pointing that out because it is nice to have Reagan on board. I know we serve on the transportation committee together, and to have someone on planning looking at it through the transportation lens, because we know that's a hot button issue in Belmont. And so we can point to some areas that maybe, like you said, have perhaps not been enforced the way they maybe should have been in the past. That was before all of you, before some of us. But I think, we all kind of are attempting to look at things going forward through that long-term lens, through that proactive lens. With the Smith Farms, not Smith Farms, with Imperial Lofts, do you guys know, just because I know it's a thorn in a lot of our sides, and we hear about it all the time, do you remember roughly when that was approved, like ballpark?
2021.
Was it before the 2018?
It would have been after. It was during my time on council. It was before Alex was, because Ryan Schrift was still here.
But it was since the 2018.
That's correct. What did I say?
No, I said it was before me, and I said I'd be for sure to say.
Yes.
Although I didn't.
It was
right now,
2021.
Are there plans to widen that portion of Main Street?
No.
Well, even if there's not,
And so I think that's where we try to analyze in the planning department that balance of understanding our community is growing and that one day, roads will need to be widened. But finding that balance point because, one day when do we make that determination? At what point do we say, okay, we're going to ask you to reserve right-of-way for a road that might be widened one day, but it hasn't been updated on the comprehensive transportation map at the MPO. It hasn't been identified for funding through the capital improvement program through the city. There's no line forward, right? Or we haven't adopted it in any of our visioning or plans for widening it, but we're gonna ask somebody to dedicate right-of-way for it. I understand logically, it kind of
There's a
makes sense that
balance.
we can go, okay, well, one day we're going to need to, but kind of that projection of when and how critical and where the priority is, and how do we balance that? Because people do have, very, I would say, sensitive concerns about private property rights and what they can do, and especially on tighter sites. Imperial Lofts being one of those, but certainly not the only one related to downtown. And so when we start talking about even taking 10 feet of a property downtown, that has significant implications on the proportional square footage of that property that we're reserving. And so if we have a funded project that's a critical path forward, even if it's not funded, but it's part of the long-range vision plans, that's where our ordinance says, hey, well, we should make them at least dedicate that right-of-way or build so that we're not infringing in that, because we already have the vision outlined in our plans that this road will be one day widened, right? So even if the vision's there but the funding's not there, we're gonna make them reserve that right-of-way. But if there's no vision, and this is why vision is so important, if there's no vision as outlined in our plans for doing those improvements, and then it's hard for us to go after funding, and if we have no vision and then we're asking property owners to invest where we ourselves don't have the vision, that's where it's hard from a planning perspective to enforce it.
Well, I mean, I tend to lean more towards, I think it's an implementation problem, not a code problem. However, if the sense is that there are ways the code can be beefed up in this area, I'm happy to look at them. I don't see any harm in going forward, and then if something's presented to us, we can all vote on whether we think it's a good idea or not. So there seems to be at least enough interest in coming up with something that would strengthen what the current code says. So, I don't see any harm in at least looking at that, and then from my perspective, I'll decide whether it's necessary or not when I see it. But, there's no harm in doing that, since that does seem to be the sense of a number of people on this body.
That's the direction we'll take.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. C8, our last item on the regular agenda, Oak Street traffic calming device recommendation. And it appears that our Public Works Director, Jonathan Wilson, is approaching the podium. So, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. So back last spring, the city received a traffic calming request for Oak Street in July. Specifically, July 2nd through the 9th of 2024, our police department performed a speed study, which resulted in just under 5,000 vehicles traveling that road in that time span. The average speed recorded was 14.5 miles per hour, with 85% of the vehicles traveling less than 19.5 miles an hour. The maximum speed recorded was 45 miles per hour, which was one vehicle. And then out of the 4,963 vehicles recorded, 59 exceeded the posted speed limit by more than 5 miles per hour, which is 25 miles per hour. As you know, there are many factors that go into determining whether traffic calming devices are warranted on specific streets. We did go through the updated policy, which was updated in October of 2024. The community or citizens that reside on Oak Street did submit a petition requesting traffic calming devices. The policy states that it has to be 75% of those living on the street or owning property on the street to sign the petition. Unfortunately, there was only 62% of the owners of the lots that signed the petition that was submitted to city staff. However, with that being the case, staff would support converting 2 intersections into 3-way stops, should council wish to move forward with that route. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions for Jonathan?
I hate they didn't get the signatures.
Well, I think there's also another problem in addition to the signatures, is that there's conceptual issues with the installing speed bumps, is that correct?
Because of
Yes,
the
sir.
topography and.
The staff wouldn't recommend speed bumps or humps in this situation anyway, due to the topography of the road, the location of the intersections that are existing, the existing stormwater infrastructure that's in the ground, and driveway locations.
But I think the three-way stops is going to make a significant difference.
I think it's a move forward,
It is.
right?
Yeah, I think that was originally what, I think they discussed maybe with Mayor Turner, some of the residents on the
Was
street.
it? I don't know.
Stop sign. I don't want to speak for that, but that was my recollection. But I agree, and, you know, it sounds like there might be some flooding concerns if the speed bumps were installed with the
Which,
stormwater.
I mean, it's a pretty steep hill.
It's, yes, it's very steep.
So you got to be practical in the matter, and I do think it's better than what's there now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it is.
So I believe the ask of us is we need to make a motion to approve the conversion of the intersections of Myrtle and Oak Streets and Park Drive and Oak Street into three-way stop signs. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir, that's correct.
I'll make
Or-
that motion to convert.
Hold on,
sorry.
How did you land on 2 three-way stops? Like, what was the thought process there?
So Oak Street is through Street at both of those intersections. Park and Oak Street being kind of at the top of or crest of the hill on Oak Street, and then Myrtle and Oak Street intersection being about midpoint. It just seemed like those were natural fits. If we were going to take action and install stop signs, that would be the logical place to put them.
I agree with that.
All right.
I'm not sure you had a second, did you?
Okay, Alex made the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Jason. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So that was the last item on the regular agenda. That now leads us to the city manager's favorite portion of the meeting, which is other business. We'll start with Alex.
First of all, hope everyone had a good holidays, Christmas and whatnot. Happy New Year to everybody.
I celebrate whatnot, by the way.
Well, I mean, I want to be as broad as I
yes.
can. I really don't have too much other than to, thank all of our, first responders, Main Street program, Public Works. We had a lot of great events this year for the Christmas. Looking forward to next year as well. Everything looks great. Downtown was great, so I appreciate everyone's work there. Ready to be back, kind of a nice little refresh, recharge with the Christmas break. So I don't really have too much. So I do actually have one thing. It's a board update. So with the MPO at the last meeting, just kind of as a heads up, this whole idea now, that we were going to be potentially secured in regards to our particular projects as it comes to funding is now kind of starting to kind of piece away. Why that is, when we talked about, for our western kind of North Carolina communities, a lot of that's going to have to be cash flowed by the state of North Carolina and then reimbursed through the FEMA program, which could potentially, as we understand, tap into NCDOT projects within our area. So just kind of a heads up there. They're still trying to kind of run the analysis to see what the impact could potentially be, but that is a change from last time I gave an update. But that's it, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Charlie?
Not much, just echoing what Alex said. Hats off to everybody that had a hand in every single event that we had in downtown. I feel like we had a ton, and everything I feel like went very well. So thank you for everybody that played a part in that. And that's about all I got. Short and sweet.
Short and sweet. Thank you. Catherine?
I got a few. I want to congratulate Chief Davis again on his retirement. I know he's excited to start his new journey in life, so congratulations to him and thank you all who did. Congratulations to all the new policemen. I'm super excited for them. They've got a fantastic chief to take care of them, so congratulations to them. Great job on the accreditation, Chief. That's really exciting and awesome. So. And again, just to echo Charlie and Alex, I think last year was a pretty tough year for everybody, and I'm looking forward to this new year starting, having a fresh start, and hopefully making Belmont great again. Jason?
Do you have any swag that has that saying on it? Make Belmont great again?
It's been copyrighted.
I would like to echo Catherine's comments about Chief Davis. Really want to give a big shout out to him and a thanks for his over 30 years of public service to our community and our state. He's done a great job for us, and he'll be sorely missed. Congratulations to our new officers who got pinned tonight, and thank you for your service. And also big kudos to Chief and your department for the CALEA certification. I know that's taken a lot of work, and appreciate all that you guys do for us. Also, as Charlie mentioned, man, the Christmas activities were just phenomenal this year, especially the Bavarian Festival. That really went over well. Got a lot of positive feedback on that, and thought everything went off without a hitch, so thank you for that. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Just a couple things. Echo the appreciation for Chief Davis and all that he's done for Belmont and stepping in back in 2022 and really, heading the ship for the fire department going forward. So we appreciate all of his service and wish him the best of luck going forward. Congratulations to our new police officers. Congratulations to the police department for CALEA recertification. We had some street lights out in Stowe Point. I think that has been submitted to Duke Energy, and hopefully those street lights will be replaced in the near future. Same thing I saw when I went onto the city website to look at the agenda, the little blurb that said the Davis Park tennis court lights are currently out of operation and hope to be up again soon. Is that?
They're up again.
They're up again? All right, great. I know it was a great day to get out there and play, so I'm sure the courts are just full right now.
I think there was a panel box that had an issue that we had to order. It took a while to get in, so it's operational now.
Again, thank you to everyone on city staff, Main Street, downtown, for all the great Christmas events over the past month. Like everyone else said, I've been asked to remind everyone that our annual Unity Day celebration is on January 20th at 6:30 p.m. at Foursquare Church. I believe it's a half hour earlier than usual this year. January 20th. So everyone is invited at 6:30 at Foursquare. Let's see. I hope everyone had a good Christmas, good food, good family time. Got to watch some good football, at least professional football.
Really? You saw some good
I saw some good football.
Oh, okay.
It didn't involve any college team from North Carolina, but
touche.
Yeah, some good professional football, and then just hopefully wishes for a good new year. Like Catherine said, it's been a long December, but there's reason to believe maybe this year will be better than the last.
I hope so. That's
Yes.
right. That's right.
So that's all I have.
I have one more. I'm so sorry.
All right. Yes.
Miles, thank you for all you've done this past year. It was not an easy year with everything we had in front of us, especially with the passing of our mayor. And you just have done such a phenomenal job. And we have the best city manager in the entire world. I am biased, but we're so thankful for you and all the hard work you do. And Tiffany, if you're still here, you've been incredible this year. I've learned so much from you. So thank you for all you've done. And Cassidy, downtown, it was amazing. Thank you for making my life easy with all the things with, vendors and all that with Love and Lemons. I'm just appreciative of everybody. Very grateful.
Well, I can't take the credit. It's all the staff members that do
Staff,
such a good job. Yeah, all the department heads and all the staff.
right.
Yeah.
I'll stipulate that everyone's wonderful.
Yes.
That's
All right.
I'm sure.
Let's go down the list.
It's not me.
I will go down the list if you'd like me to. I was trying to just
It's the
pinpoint,
staff.
but then
It's
I
not
was
me.
like, I got
No,
it.
that's a great point, great way to wrap up.
So I'm very
Appreciate
thankful
it.
for everyone.
Agreed.
Anything on your end, Miles? There's a ribbon cutting at Caramount
Tomorrow.
Hospital tomorrow
Yes.
at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yes.
So don't forget that.
I think the activities start at like 9:30. I think I read that today.
I will be in the office, so I will not.
Yeah, you guys will miss me on that one.
You had to RSVP
You could still go, probably, if you wanted to.
Probably can.
Anything else, Miles?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, we have a closed session, so I would entertain a motion in that regard.
Motion to go into closed session?
Oh, he's got to read
Or
this.
do
Yes, we have to read the statute.
Motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 31811A and 4, to discuss matters relating to location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area and to include Kevin Kraus and the company representative.
All right, thank you, Alex. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are in closed session. We will take a few minutes